A strange UFO sighting was captured over New Jersey recently. In a 13-second clip shot near Atlantic City on a Sunday night back in December, a strange white light blinks in the sky before suddenly vanishing. Family members who were watching the light in the sky were completely baffled by what they were looking at. The thing just kind of hovers in the sky, slightly flickering before it looks like it disappears. Turns out that's not exactly the case. A man named Tim Janicki, who received the footage from a friend, posted it online with the heading reading, "I don't trust random videos I see on X, but this is 100% real." So this video has been getting shared around quite a bit. One commenter pointed out, "You can see it didn't just disappear, but it took off with incredible speed. There's a small flash of light to the left as it leaves. Humans can't produce the energy required to go that fast, especially from standstill." And that's true. If you look closely, you do see this really quick blip of light appear in the upper left of the screen right after the strange orb of light looks like it vanishes. Other people commented similar things, like one person saying, "No flight system we have right now can go from stationary to warp drive in an instant. These flight characteristics are well beyond light years ahead of us." Now, this is just one incident in a long list of strange sightings in the sky over New Jersey, which led the FAA to briefly limit drone flights in some areas. The FBI and other federal agencies have been looking into a bunch of the reports apparently, and they claim that so far they haven't found anything pointing to a national security threat. Again, so they say. This footage here was posted to Reddit by user YogurtClosetFlat5701 just a couple weeks ago with the caption, "This just happened above Brookville Boulevard, Snake Road in Queens, New York, right next to JFK Airport. We looked up and there were 4 orange orbs in formation in what is supposed to be a no-fly zone. They then started to disappear. Did anybody else in the area witness this?" End of post. And that's a good question. Any New Yorkers in the comments see this as well? Let us know down in the comments here. There are some interesting comments from other witnesses on the post though. One user, Zora Octavia, wrote, "Lived here for 14 years with planes flying by all day, every day. They fly so low it feels like you can almost touch them. I know what they look like when they come into land and take off. I have never seen anything like this. Ever." And that's not the only strange orange orb that's been spotted in the sky recently. On December 26th, a Redditor by the name of HellFollowed84 posted this footage. The video was shot in central Georgia. A father had gone to take out the trash when he spotted the strange orb in the sky. He noticed something, quote, "bright and orange overhead through the pines." He pointed it out to his son and they both just stared at it for several minutes before deciding to film it. The father shared the video on Reddit. In the clip we see this glowing orange orb gliding across the sky, weaving between the tops of pine trees. At one point, the orb looks like it dims and then vanishes entirely. As HellFollowed84 wrote, "When I first observed it, the light was huge, but it was way off, like half a mile. As it got closer, it seemed to dim but stayed the same luminous lighting. As I walked further to capture it, I thought, what if it was trying to evade me?" A bunch of Redditors wondered if it could be a plane, but the user didn't think so, saying it made no sound, unlike the planes that frequently fly over his home. And we're back to New Jersey with another set of strange lights in the sky captured on camera recently. A YouTuber named CJ Faison recently posted footage showing what he believes are drones flying in, quote, "deliberate formations" off the coast of New Jersey over the Atlantic Ocean. He took a boat 26 miles out from the Pine Barrens to get the footage using a night vision camera. In the video, he'd gone out to get footage of the mysterious drones that people have been spotting in the skies over the last couple months. He did manage to capture a bunch of these blinking lights in the sky. Some are stationary, some are seen moving through the sky, some appear and disappear completely, and some of the drones seem to zip across the horizon at incredible speeds. It is definitely odd. CJ wrote in the video description, "The drones in New Jersey have been seen coming from the ocean for several weeks. We found UAP drones in the middle of the ocean 100%. This is something they don't want you to see." Now, sure, people have access to drones nowadays. There are more things in the sky than there ever have been in history, but it seems like people are spotting particularly bright, rather large objects moving at speeds way too fast to be your over-the-counter drone. And again, the FBI is getting involved. They've investigated around 5,000 reports about these drones, claiming that about 100 of them are considered credible. As of now, there have been no clear answers from authorities on who's behind the drones or what they're up to. This next report comes out again from New Jersey. This time, it's not just lights in the sky though. Whatever this object was, it actually affected the clock in a family's car. In early December, a family reported a strange effect while following one of these strange crafts that people have been seeing in the sky. As they drove along, the car's clock suddenly changed time, then went back to normal once they drove away. Local law enforcement in Morris County insists that there's no known threat to public safety, but residents are still trying to figure out what's going on themselves. There's even a Facebook group with over 17,000 members exchanging info on these sightings. One local software engineer, Rich Dunjewski, thinks the clock change might be a clue. He commented, "Many newer cars get their clock time from GPS satellites," adding that the drones could be using GPS jamming or spoofing. He went on to say that if these drones are using, quote, GPS jamming, then it's plausible the car would follow the signal and change the clock. FAA contractor David Lombardo agreed, saying these drones likely have electronic interference capabilities. A strange UAP was captured on camera back in 2018, but the video was kept secret for years. It was just released to the public last year in January of 2024. The object was spotted flying over a US military base in Iraq and was tracked by a military infrared radar. It moved across the base before making a controlled descent into a body of water. About 17 minutes later, it reappeared and took off at an incredible speed. The Pentagon has officially classified it as a UAP. What caught a lot of attention was how quickly the object changed color. You'll notice that the object keeps switching from this semi-translucent look to black. And since the video was shot using infrared, the color changes indicate shifts in temperature. The object was changing temperature so fast that it actually made it difficult for the radar to even track. And according to Dr. Matthew Sadagas, a physics professor at the University of Albany, it was doing this, quote, faster than any known object. This next video comes from the YouTube channel Plant Abundance, who wrote in the description that he'd been outside doing some tree work when this bright object caught his eye. He watched it as it stayed stationary for about a minute and a half before fetching his camera. He caught the tail end of it before it drifted downward and faded out. Again, this is another recent clip posted on October 14th of 2024. Now the object is hard to make out. It's obviously pretty high up, but zooming in, it's definitely not a plane or a satellite. It doesn't even look like your typical drone. It looks like a spherical metallic object. So what is it? I don't know. What do you all think? This footage was taken a few years ago. It's another spherical flying orb. The AARO, the office within the US Department of Defense that handles UAPs, released the footage captured by an MQ-9 Reaper drone during a Senate hearing in the Middle East. The video shows an orb smoothly flying through the sky at a high speed. The AARO came out saying that they had no idea what it was, calling it a genuine UAP, but they also mentioned it was not the first time they'd seen something like it. On December 16th of 2024, tourists at Disney World in Orlando caught sight of a glowing red UFO streaking upward in the night sky. The object kinda looks like a falling star, but in reverse. The video made the rounds on TikTok with people commenting it was a UAP of extraterrestrial origin. Now, unlike a lot of the other stuff on this list, this one may have a very clear explanation, and while that explanation probably isn't aliens, it's still pretty cool. The glowing streak was probably a SpaceX rocket that launched that night. Falcon 9's reusable booster successfully landed in the Atlantic after 8.5 minutes. SpaceX was transporting a GPS satellite for the US military. There was a similar sighting near Disney on December 23rd, also very likely a SpaceX mission. So this final story comes from a new docu-series called Investigation Alien. Footage was captured showing a strange object descending into the English Channel. The series follows journalist George Knapp and his team, including underwater archaeologist Rory Kremer, as they dig into evidence of extraterrestrial life. During one of their expeditions off the coast of Normandy, they spotted an illuminated object about 200 yards away. At first, it was stationary, but then it sped off, only to return later, but at that point, most of the crew was asleep. Kremer, though, was on night watch, and he was able to capture the object on camera as it plummeted into the water. Knapp was shocked when he saw the footage. He returned Kremer for an explanation, and Kremer, who's been in the field for over 20 years, admitted, "I don't got any answers, do you?" He thought it might be a flare, but it didn't have the typical smoke. As the object disappeared into the water, Knapp suggested it could be tied to some sort of subterranean base. Kremer pointed out that local tribes in the region have long reported unexplained lights, which were often linked to gods. They both agreed that the footage could be evidence of something much bigger lurking beneath the surface. Now, is this story legit or just a clever way of promoting the series? That's for you to decide. But based on everything on this list, could
the Roswell incident is arguably the most famous UFO crash in history, although the government would claim otherwise. Basically, on June 24th of 1947, while searching for a crashed military aircraft, pilot Kenneth Arnold spotted 9 UFOs flying over the Cascade Mountains of Washington state in the US. The objects were flying in formation at a height of about 10,000 feet and a speed of approximately 1,900 kilometers per hour, which was not possible at the time, for humans that is. Kenneth described the way the objects moved as jerky, like rocks skipping over the water, flashing forward at strange intervals. When the media got a hold of the story, they coined the phrase flying saucer, and the UFO craze took off at hyperspeed. Especially when on July 7th, a local rancher named Mac Brazel called the sheriff to let him know that one of those objects had somehow ended up on his farm, and this came to be known as the Roswell incident.
It was back in July of 1947 that something strange happened near Roswell, New Mexico. Something had crashed into the ground, into Brazel's farm. There were metal pieces, rubber strips, and a strange tin foil-like material. The nearby Roswell Army airfield was alerted. The military came out and collected the debris. At first, they issued a press release saying they had recovered an unknown flying disc. This really got people talking, but just a day later the Army changed their story, saying it was actually just a weather balloon. Now, while some of the public took this at face value, it caused some controversy, especially in the years to come. People started to believe that the military was covering up something much bigger, possibly an alien spacecraft crash. Over the years, people started to come forward claiming to have seen the wreckage, and not only were there strange markings on the material described by some as hieroglyphics, but the material was incredibly strong and seemed to almost be impossible to burn. Oh, and of course, people who'd been called to the site to recover the material claimed to have seen bodies that were clearly not human. Over the years, many people have questioned the official explanation for this incident. Even former military personnel and locals said they saw strange things at the crash site, like debris that didn't look like it came from any known aircraft, and even small bodies that didn't seem human. In 1994, the US Air Force released a report saying the debris was from a top secret project called Project Mogul, a project that used high altitude balloons to detect Soviet nuclear tests. They said the unusual materials found were just parts of these balloons and their sensors, but this explanation didn't satisfy everyone. In 1997, on the 50th anniversary of the incident, the Air Force released another report to address the claims about these alien bodies. They said these were actually just crash test dummies used in military experiments, not extraterrestrial beings. But again, a lot of people were and still are highly skeptical of this. The Roswell incident happened less than 2 years after the atomic bombs were dropped on Japan in 1945. Those bombs were created through a secret project that lasted 3 years and had 3 main sites, including one in New Mexico. So if the government could keep the atomic bomb a secret for so long, why wouldn't they be able and willing to hide information about a crashed UFO landing? Plus, little mannequins? I think most people would look at that and be able to tell the difference between an alien and a crash test dummy.
So this foreign object that landed on Mac Brazel's farm actually did so a few days prior to him calling into the sheriff's department. To be honest, he hadn't thought much of it until he started reading about Kenneth Arnold flying saucers and UFOs in the papers. Once he learned about the possible presence of technologically advanced ships with no known origin that likely came from outer space, he began to wonder if that was in fact what had landed on his farm just a few nights ago, and so he gathered up some of the debris and took them down to the local police station. In response, the sheriff immediately contacted the nearby army base, and soon intelligence officer Jesse Marcel had arrived on the scene and instructed Brazel to take him to the crash site so that the two could collect more debris. So let's talk about Jesse Marcel, the first military officer to step foot on the scene of the crash, because apparently Jesse had a lot to say, according to his son Jesse Jr., who went on to tell his father's story after his death in 1986. According to Jesse Jr., in 1947, when he was just 10 years old, his father woke him up in the middle of the night, excited after having visited the crash site. Jesse Jr. sat up as Jesse Sr. handed him some of the debris he had collected earlier that day on Brazel's farm, and he told Jesse Jr. to get a good look because the debris were something that he would never see again. They were not of this earth, and the pair simply could not make sense of them. Out of all of the debris his father had brought home, Jesse Jr. said that the one that fascinated him most was a small beam with purple-hued hieroglyphics. I suppose it's not difficult to see why the pair didn't believe the government when they released a report saying that what had been found on the Brazel's farm was nothing more than a discarded weather balloon. But of course, you don't mess with the government. And so for years, both Jesse Jr. and his father kept quiet about what they had seen. That is until in the late 1970s, a man named Stanton Friedman showed up asking questions. Stanton T. Friedman, a nuclear physicist turned ufologist, tracked down Jesse Sr. after being tipped off that a retired military man might know something about the Roswell incident, something that had been kept from the public for the past 31 years. And it turns out he did. Jesse Sr. told Freeman that the weather balloon story had in fact been a cover-up, and that the original wreckage had been replaced with a weather balloon shortly after military personnel first arrived on the scene. Not only that, but Jesse claimed that despite what their superiors had wanted them to believe, it was incredibly clear to everyone working on the site that the object had in fact been an extraterrestrial spaceship with outstanding craftsmanship and incredibly advanced out-of-this-world technologies. Although, unfortunately, Jesse did claim that he never got to witness the alleged aliens inside of the craft being pulled out, but still, he's ex-military, he was there. It's a pretty compelling case if you ask me.
There are also witnesses aside from Brazel's claiming to have seen some strange things. So many of these witnesses stayed silent for years, but eventually began speaking out to close friends or family about what they'd seen, still fearing repercussions from the government. There was another crash site about 40 miles from Brazel's ranch where more wreckage and alien bodies were said to be being recovered. A firefighter who went to this site claimed that he saw a large disc in the ground and several small, non-human bodies nearby. He said that military officials told him to keep quiet about what he saw. Sergeant Melvin Brown also shared his experience. He said he rode in a truck with the bodies from the crash site to Roswell Field and then stood guard at the hangar where they were first kept. He was instructed not to look under a tarp, but he got curious and he peeked. He claimed he saw 2 alien bodies. The government has always denied his claims, but several people who were there or knew people who were there have said they saw wreckage and bodies arrive at Wright Field. Retired General Arthur Exon stated that a top secret committee was set up to oversee the investigation of this and other classified UFO incidents. After the Roswell crash, the debris was secretly flown from Fort Worth, Texas to Wright Field in Dayton, Ohio. At Wright Field, Lieutenant Colonel Arthur Exon, who later became the base commander, recalled that some of the material was very thin, but incredibly strong. And it wasn't just metal that arrived at Wright Field either. At the second crash site a few miles from the first, they discovered a smaller, more intact craft and 4 bodies lying nearby. These bodies did not look human. Again, according to witnesses, the bodies were described as being in fairly good condition despite having been exposed for 6 days. Some parts of the bodies have been chewed on by animals. Descriptions from those who saw the bodies are pretty consistent. They were said to be 4 to 5 feet tall, with big heads, large eyes, and small mouths. Basically your classic idea of an alien. They had thin bodies with long arms and 4 fingers. An army nurse who worked on the initial autopsy described how fragile the skulls and bones were too. The bodies were quickly placed in large, sealed wooden crates, loaded onto a B-29 bomber and flown to Fort Worth before being sent to Wright Field.
Now, the general public weren't the only ones concerned with the Roswell crash. In fact, one of the highest members of government was too, the president, which at the time was Harry S. Truman. After the incident took place, Truman became increasingly interested and concerned with UFOs, so much so that in 1948 he called a meeting with his military aide, Colonel Robert Laundrie, in the Oval Office to discuss UFO reports and what they might mean for the security of the country. Laundrie told Truman that, quote, all manner of objects and things were being seen in the sky by people as of late, which only led the president to worry more about the possibility of new, never-before-seen threats to the American people. And so Truman ordered a quarterly oral report from both Laundrie and the Air Force to be presented to him at the White House to discuss whether or not the UFO sightings would present any kind of immediate danger. Although neither the military or the Air Force were ever able or willing to provide Truman with any answers, the UFO sightings kept coming and officials became more and more confused. To this day, it's unclear what information the government has gathered on UFOs, but what we do know is that if they do in fact have concrete evidence supporting the existence of alien life forms, they sure as heck aren't sharing it with us. Yet, fingers crossed.
The Roswell incident was the catalyst for pretty much every modern UFO conspiracy today. Before Roswell, the idea of aliens was just that, really, an idea. But when stories about this mysterious crash hit the papers, it really changed the public's view of the possibility of alien life forever. Suddenly, what people had read about in science fiction and fantasy novels or watched on the big screen was something a lot more concrete. Project Blue Book formed a few years after the Roswell incident, a genuine Air Force program dedicated to investigating UFOs, at least in the early days. Area 51, the mysterious Men in Black, Majestic 12, all of these things started being whispered about in the years following the Roswell incident. There are large sections of Antarctica that are completely off limits to the public. They're called the ASPA, Antarctic Specially Protected Areas. These are regions in Antarctica given special protection. The only people allowed to set foot there are scientists or military to make sure people don't mess with the ecosystems or disrupt the scientific research. But as we know, any top secret area is going to spark a lot of questions. So a lot of conspiracy theories about Antarctica stem from these protected areas. When people hear about no-fly zones or areas where only certain scientists can go, they start to wonder why. So are these restricted areas concealing more than your standard scientific research? Are there secret military bases involved in dangerous research, possibly even involving aliens? Since only a few are allowed in, it's easy for imaginations to conjure things up, but is there any evidence of disturbing stuff going on in the frozen tundra of Antarctica?
In the 1950s, Professor Charles Hapgood proposed a fabulous theory that hidden underneath the ice sheets is the lost city of Atlantis. If you know me, you know I absolutely love the ocean and the movie Atlantis, The Lost Empire, so I am all for this theory. Basically, and we have lots of videos on this, Antarctica used to be a subtropical landscape, and that's not just a theory, that's a fact. You can look it up. But what if that subtropical landscape just so happens to be the landscape of Atlantis, home to the incredibly intelligent and powerful Atlanteans? Furthermore, it is believed that prior to the entire city sinking into the ocean and being engulfed in ice, the Atlanteans migrated from Antarctica to Mexico to found Aztec and Mayan empires, and then to Egypt to create the Egyptian Empire as well. I mean, it would explain the similarities between the pyramids and hieroglyphics found in both locations. Something to think about. The presence of Atlanteans in Egypt, Mexico, and Antarctica might also explain the pyramids in Antarctica. Yeah. In 2016, 3 pyramids were discovered in Antarctica measuring up to 4,000 feet tall, meaning they are just about 10 times larger than the Great Pyramid of Giza located in Egypt, which previously held the record of largest pyramid in the world. While there are no records of ancient civilizations having existed in Antarctica, many people agree that that doesn't matter. Why? Well, because the entirety of Antarctica literally used to be a subtropical paradise and now it's covered covered in 2,160 meters of ice. So I'm sorry scientists, but you just might not be able to access the evidence because it's been buried under over 7,000 feet of ice for the past 34 million years. Of course, the other theory is that the aliens built the pyramid and then traveled to Mexico and Egypt to do the same thing there. 6 in one, half a dozen in the other, I guess. Either way, the existence of the Antarctic pyramids and the similarities they share with the pyramids found in the warmer regions of Egypt and Mexico are undeniable.
Operation Deep Freeze was a series of US Navy missions starting in 1955 to establish American research bases in Antarctica. The operation involved tons of military personnel, scientists, and staff, but during some of these missions there were a few reports from crew members and scientists about strange things they'd spot in the sky over Antarctica. Unusual lights or objects moving in ways that didn't match any known aircraft. These reports aren't nearly as well known as others that come to mind, and a lot of that has to do with, one, how remote Antarctica is. There just weren't mass amounts of people to corroborate the sightings, and two, the people who were there were government employees. So much of what they were doing wasn't allowed to be disclosed, even leaving UFOs out of the picture. One of the most famous UFO sightings over Antarctica happened in 1965, though. During a period of intense scientific research in the continent, researchers spotted something in the sky. It was near the Antarctic coast where a group of researchers had been working. They reported seeing an unusual object that didn't look like any known aircraft. According to the reports, the object was bright and metallic, moving in these sporadic, unpredictable patterns. It changed direction suddenly and moved at speeds that seemed far too fast for any technology that was known at the time. Now, at this same time, there were very few aircraft in the region, making this whole thing even stranger.
All right, buckle up, because for this next one, we've got the rhymes with Yahtzees, aliens, and nuclear weapons. That's right, there is a theory that states that Antarctica is actually a secret, oppressive Germany circa World War II military base dedicated to housing advanced technologies and massive nuclear weapons that could quite literally eradicate all of us in a matter of minutes, if whoever is currently running the base decided to set them all off at once. To make matters worse, a recent evidence shows that a secret military base close to the North Pole, located in northwest Greenland, might be used for the same thing. So, if whoever they are wanted, they could probably take out the whole planet. Not comforting. Now, some people take the whole thing a step further by bringing aliens into the mix, saying that the advanced technologies are actually out of this world technologies brought to Earth by our extraterrestrial alien friends. Now, if we have extraterrestrial allies, who's to say we don't have otherworldly adversaries as well? Maybe the advanced tech is to protect us rather than destroy us. One can only hope.
For decades, there have been rumors that the Third Reich also set up a secret base in Antarctica during World War II. The Third Reich were known for their interest in mysticism and the occult, always on the hunt for ancient artifacts they believed had special powers to help them conquer the world, and some people think they might have been searching for something hidden deep in the frozen tundra of Antarctica. Either that or they were experimenting with advanced high-tech weapons, Antarctica being perfect given how remote it is. Some even think these secret research projects carried on after the war ended, and after the Second World War in 1946 and 47, the US did send a large naval fleet to Antarctica in an operation called Operation High Jump. The official reason was to train personnel and test equipment, but some conspiracy theorists believe the real mission was to find and destroy this alleged German base, to take out the remnants of their forces and their secret projects for good. Or maybe they were shown up to take over the research for themselves.
Take a look at this 130-foot tall, nearly perfect rectangular iceberg. Does it look natural to you? Yeah, me neither. There are a ton of these strangely geometric icebergs scattered throughout Antarctica. Why? Well, the scientific explanation is that they naturally formed after part of an iceberg broke off of a much larger iceberg, which is cool and all, but not nearly as interesting as the leading conspiracy theory. You see, many people believe that the icebergs were carved by aliens thousands of years ago as some kind of launching pad or secret base. Scientists say that's ridiculous because not every corner of the iceberg is perfect, only some. I mean, duh, they were carved thousands of years ago. Ever heard of erosion? Next thing you know, they're gonna start saying that the pyramids weren't created by ancient Egyptians, but after a rock broke off a bigger rock because the top isn't perfectly pointy. Nice try, scientists. Perhaps the government shares the secret underground base with the aliens, and that is why they are so keen on keeping us out and taking every possible precaution to make sure we don't find out the truth about what really goes on in the Great White South.
Now, moving outside of the conspiratorial and theoretical realm for a moment, let's talk about a very real and very mysterious lake in Antarctica, Lake Vostok, the largest known subglacial lake in the continent. The lake is buried beneath more than 2 miles of ice, so what makes this place extra special? Well, it's been sealed off from the world for about 15 million years. That means whatever's swimming around down there has been doing its thing in total isolation for longer than humans have been around. The lake is pretty much one big prehistoric time capsule. It was completely untouched by the outside world for millions of years, but scientists have started attempting to explore it. It's not easy though. They gotta set up camp in one of the coldest places on Earth and then drill through ice thicker than your average skyscraper is tall, while trying not to contaminate the water down below. But in 2012, scientists did confirm they found living organisms in the lake, microbes living in a place where no one expected life to thrive. So, who knows what else could be lurking even deeper down? Speaking of deeper down, here's Hannah.
Is Antarctica actually the entrance to center Earth? Well, maybe. It's a story as old as time, or, well, a story as old as the conspiracy theory at least. There are, believe it or not, a group of people who believe that an asteroid that crashed into Antarctica millions of years ago caused a crack in the Earth that revealed a secret utopia. In 2006, scientists working in Antarctica discovered a crater deep underneath the permafrost, and of course, they believed the crater had been formed by an asteroid. But conspiracy theorists believe that scientists aren't telling the whole truth. They say that the crater actually cracked right through the top layer of Earth to reveal that tropical paradise that is now the go-to vacation hotspot for the world's global elites, presidents, celebrities, and perhaps aliens too. There are also theories out there that say that the asteroid really did just create a crater, but that crater is where the soldiers from World War II Germany set up camp. Alongside the aliens, of course.
In August of 1976, 4 men went on a camping trip in the Allagash Wilderness in Maine. Jack and Jim Weiner, along with Chuck Rack and Charlie Foltz, were off on what was supposed to be this peaceful getaway when things took a turn. On their second night, Jim spotted a bright object in the sky. It was there for about 30 seconds, then it disappeared. Not super out of the ordinary in the deep woods, the sky is just lit up with stars at night, easy to misidentify things, but 2 nights later, while they were out fishing, the same bright object appeared a second time. Chuck noticed it at first. It looked super intense. This time it was almost like the sun, they said, and they watched it as it followed them along the water. Charlie, thinking it was some kind of signal, even tried to flash an SOS to the object. And that's when things got really weird. They described this light shooting a beam down towards them, which followed them all the way back to shore. And when they got back to their campsite, something else was off. The fire they'd left burning was completely out, and they felt totally exhausted, like they'd been gone for hours. The next few days were uneventful, and they didn't see the light again, but after they got back home, the men started having these disturbing nightmares, often about sitting naked on a bench, feeling afraid. That night stuck with the men, but it wasn't until 1988 that they finally had enough and decided to seek out answers. Jim reached out to UFO researcher Ray Fowler, and they all agreed to undergo hypnosis to try and make sense of these strange memories. And under this hypnosis, each man recalled being abducted by aliens. They described terrifying beings practicing medical exams on them, even having their skin and bodily fluids taken. Later, when they compared notes, they realized that their memories matched up exactly. They even passed polygraph tests. On the night of October 11th, 1973, in Pascagoula, Mississippi, two men, Charles Hickson and Calvin Parker, had a terrifying encounter they were never able to explain. While fishing off a pier by the Pascagoula River, they heard a strange whirring sound and saw flashing blue lights. Next thing they knew, an oval-shaped object about 30 to 40 feet across appeared above them. They were completely paralyzed as three bizarre creatures with robotic, slit mouths and crab-like pincers took them aboard the craft. Once inside, Hickson and Parker claimed the creatures performed some kind of examination on them. They both stayed silent for years about the details, but Hickson eventually opened up, even writing a book in 1983 about the encounter. Parker was quieter at first, but started attending UFO conventions, and in 2018, he released his own book, giving his side of the story for the first time. In 2019, the site of the abduction was marked with a plaque to honor the event, and Parker, deeply emotional, said he wanted to be buried there someday. Hickson passed away in 2011, but Parker continued to speak about the encounter until his death in 2023. Of course, some say the two made this story up, but what if they didn't? What if something actually happened to these two men that they were never able to forget? And writing it all down and sharing their story with the world was their only way of working through something that they couldn't even begin to understand. In 1979, Deputy Sheriff Val Johnson from Marshall County, Minnesota, had a strange encounter while on patrol. On the night of August 27th, around 2 a.m., he saw a beam of light just above the road near Stephen, Minnesota. The light shot toward him and engulfed his squad car. Johnson reported hearing glass breaking before losing consciousness. When he came to, 39 minutes had passed. The car's windshield was shattered, one of the headlights and the red emergency light were damaged, and the radio antenna was bent. When backup deputies arrived, they found Johnson's squad car sideways on the road. He had bruises and eye irritation, which a doctor later compared to burns from a welder's torch. When Johnson's story came out, it gained a lot of attention. All it did was make matters worse, though. Johnson would later say it, understandably, caused a lot of emotional distress for him and his family. Till this day, nobody knows exactly what happened that night, but part of me wonders if he just got into a car accident and was too embarrassed to admit it. Not to ruin the party or anything, but I don't know. What do you all think of this one? This next one is really weird, so strap in. So in 1957, a Brazilian farmer named Antonio Vilas Boas had one of the craziest nights of his life. On October 15th, while working late in the fields, he spotted this bright red star-like object in the sky. The object came down, eventually landing. It was an egg-shaped craft, and from it came these humanoid figures. They were about 5 feet tall with small blue eyes and white hair, and they were dressed in what looked like these gray overalls or equipment, and they had these helmets on. Before he knew it, Antonio was grabbed and taken aboard the craft. Once inside, the aliens took samples of his bodily fluids and performed a whole series of other medical examinations. Then they led him into another room, where he was introduced to a female humanoid, according to him, a very attractive one. He described her as having small round eyes, white hair, and a human-like appearance. And after some strange interactions, well, you can guess what happened next. And once the bizarre encounter was over, the craft released him back into the field and took off. Antonio, understandably shaken, eventually told his family about it. Not sure how that conversation would have gone, but I'm gonna assume it was awkward. His story soon caught the attention of the Brazilian military and the media. People had a lot of questions. Some thought his story was incredible. Some just laughed him off. But Antonio stuck by his story all the way up until his death in 1991. On September 3rd of 1965, 18-year-old Norman Muscarello was hitchhiking home along Route 150 in New Hampshire. Around 2 a.m., he saw 5 bright red lights hovering above the trees. At first he thought they were police or fire lights, but when he got closer he realized the lights were coming from a massive object around 80 to 90 feet wide, but somehow was completely silent. Panicking, he drove into a ditch and watched in horror as this object started moving toward him before changing direction and hovering over a nearby farmhouse. Norman ran to a neighbor's house for help, but he got no response. Eventually he flagged down a car and was driven to the local police station, where he told Officer Reginald Toland about what he saw. Toland was already familiar with Muscarello, and he took him seriously. He radioed Officer Eugene Bertrand to investigate, and when they went back to the sighting location, the object did appear again, hovering silently and rocking back and forth. The officers just stood there completely stunned, not knowing what to do, before the thing disappeared. After the police reported the incident, the Air Force investigated, but their helpful explanation was that it was just stars or a military exercise. Muscarello and the officers weren't so convinced, nor are a lot of people who've heard about the story in the years since. In 1961, Betty and Barney Hill, a couple from New Hampshire, became one of the most famous cases of alien abduction. After a vacation, they were driving home when they noticed this strange light in the sky. At first, Betty thought it was a falling star, but it moved erratically and it was getting larger and brighter. Eventually, Barney decided to just pull over so they could take a look. As they watched, Betty saw some sort of craft with multicolored lights moving across the moon. They continued to stare for a while, but what happened next nearly gave them a heart attack. Suddenly, the craft dropped down toward their car and just hovered above it. Barney stepped out and, using binoculars, he looked up to see a bunch of what he said were humanoid figures inside this craft. One figure seemed to communicate with him telepathically, warning him to stay where he was. Terrified, Barney ran back to the car and the couple just sped off. As they drove away, they heard a strange beeping sound, and then they lost track of time, suddenly finding themselves near Concord hours later than they'd expected. When they got home, they noticed other odd things too. Their clothes were damaged, their watches had stopped working, and there was a strange pink powder on Betty's dress. The Hills couldn't explain what had happened, and both underwent hypnosis sessions later on, which revealed eerie, consistent memories of alien abduction. On December 1st, 1987, a retired police officer known only as Spencer to the press was out for a walk in Ilkley Moor in England. While climbing a small hill, he saw a strange figure ahead of him, about 4 feet tall, dark green, with an oversized head and long, thin arms. The figure made a gesture that seemed to warn Spencer to stay back, but instead he took out his camera and he snapped a photo. The creature then ran off. Spencer followed but lost track of it in the fog. That's when Spencer saw a craft rise from the moor. He said it had 2 saucer-shaped parts stacked on top of each other and that it hummed loudly as it disappeared into the sky. At this point, Spencer decided that his walk was over and he started heading to town, only to realize he was hours later than he should have been. His compass was also pointing in the wrong direction. In the days that followed, Spencer reached out to UFO researchers Jenny Randles and Peter Howe. The photograph Spencer took was examined by experts, and while it couldn't be proven to be fake, it was also too grainy for any real conclusion either. According to UFOologist Nick Redfern, Spencer was also visited by 2 men in black who apparently intimidated him into staying silent. On the night of August 21st, 1955, in Hopkinsville, Kentucky, a bizarre incident took place that has gone down as one of the craziest cryptid reports of all time, at least that I've read about. A group of 12 people who'd been staying at their small family farm rushed to the local police station saying that they had been under attack by small, alien-looking creatures. They claimed these creatures were about 3 to 4 feet tall and were peeking into their farmhouse windows and doorways, and that they'd been fighting them off for hours. And this all happened after they saw some weird light descend into the trees by the farmhouse. So 2 adults, Elmer Sutton and Billy Ray Taylor, described seeing short, dark figures popping up and even tried to hold them off with gunfire. Soon police, state troopers, and military personnel from nearby Fort Campbell showed up to investigate. What they found were signs of gunfire and holes in the farmhouse's windows and door screens, but no sign of any creatures. The following day, the family packed up and they left the farmhouse. The mysterious creatures were never seen again. November of 1979, Robert Taylor, a forestry worker from Scotland, had an encounter that left him badly shaken and injured. Taylor had gone for a walk near Detchmont Law, a wooden area in Livingston, when he'd claimed to see a strange flying dome. He described the object as a large metallic sphere about 7 yards in diameter, hovering above the ground. It also had a rough sandpaper-like texture and small propellers on its rim. According to Taylor, the thing sprouted smaller spheres, which he compared to sea mines, that started dragging him toward the larger object. Then everything went black. When he came to, the strange craft and smaller objects were gone. Taylor tried to start his truck, but It wasn't working, so he walked home. When he got home, his wife was in shock. Taylor was disheveled, his clothes were torn, and he had grazes on his chin and thighs. The police were called, and after examining the site, they found odd marks in the ground, which Taylor said were caused by these strange objects. Finally, in November of 1980, Alan Godfrey, a police constable in West Yorkshire, was responding to reports of cattle roaming a council estate when he saw this strange diamond-shaped light hovering above the road. It was about 20 feet high and 14 feet wide, rotating slowly. He tried to radio for backup, but his equipment suddenly wasn't working. And then, just like that, the object vanished. Godfrey found himself 30 yards down the road. He was unable to explain where the last 30 minutes had gone. He also had a split boot and a strange red mark on his foot. Later, under hypnosis, Godfrey recalled being hit by a beam of light, causing him to lose consciousness. He remembered then waking up inside a room being examined by small, non-human beings and a more humanoid figure. Godfrey would later say it was possible the whole thing was a dream, but at the time, he felt very strongly that what he experienced was real. He also thought the experience led to his early retirement from the police force.
Now, if you know anything about UFOs, you know about the Roswell incident that took place on a farm in Roswell, New Mexico back in 1947. But if you don't, here's the quick notes. In 1947, a UFO crash landed on Mac Brazel's farm. He didn't think much of it until UFO reports started coming out in the local newspaper. Brazel notified local authorities, the Air Force got involved, the crashed object was taken to Area 51, and the whole thing was written off as a crashed weather balloon, despite Brazel and military personnel claiming otherwise. Well, did you know that from 1947 to 2018, the crash site was a designated no-go zone? That's right, the entire area was closed off to the public for an entire 71 years, likely so the government could cover all their bases in ensuring that the public would never know the true nature of the crash. In 2018, the site was finally reopened to the public, but unfortunately, at this point, all evidence of what was most definitely an alien spaceship — you don't close off an area for 71 years because of a crashed weather balloon — is now long gone.
The Kecksburg UFO case has to be one of the strangest UFO cases in history. On December 9th, 1965, people in 6 US states, as well as parts of Canada, reported spotting a fireball streak across the sky over Detroit, Michigan, and Windsor, Ontario. Then folks in the small village of Kecksburg, Pennsylvania, claimed to see something crash into the woods after seeing wisps of blue smoke and feeling vibrations. Authorities cordoned off the area and searched the forest, later claiming to find nothing and saying the object was likely just a meteor. But that didn't line up with what a number of witnesses had seen. People who did manage to get close to the crash site described seeing a large acorn-shaped object partially buried in the ground. It was about the size of a small car and had strange markings that almost looked like hieroglyphics. But they didn't get a very long look before the military stepped in. So what exactly was this object? Was it a Soviet satellite? A piece of top-secret military equipment? Was it not from Earth at all? This case is nowhere near as famous as something like Roswell, but it has come up on shows like Unsolved Mysteries, and UFO investigators still reference it to this day. But the truth as to what really crashed into the forest is still undisclosed.
Since the Roswell incident, New Mexico has been a hot spot for UFO sightings. UFO crashes, however, are far less common, but they still do happen, no matter how much the FBI and the Pentagon wants us to think they don't. Luckily, free speech is still more or less a thing. Or we probably never would have heard of the March 25th, 1948 UFO crash at Hart Canyon Hiking Trail, in which a spacecraft of unknown origins crashed into the mesa and was promptly recovered and covered up by the United States Air Force and 5th Army Division. According to a plaque located at the site, the recovery operation took a total of 2 weeks to complete, and all materials taken from the site were brought to the Los Alamos Laboratory for scientific study and evaluation. According to eyewitness reports, the spacecraft was approximately 100 feet in diameter and 18 feet tall, and according to insiders, it had been transporting as many as 16 extraterrestrials who, unfortunately, all died on impact.
In the spring of 1941, 6 years before the infamous Roswell incident, something crashed just outside Cape Girardeau, Missouri. A local Reverend William Huffman had been called to perform last rites at the site, and when he arrived, he was shocked to see a strange metallic saucer-shaped object. Around it were small bodies, and the bodies didn't look human. He claimed the bodies were about 4 feet tall, with large heads and eyes and thin limbs. The military quickly took control, removing the wreckage and the bodies, and the incident was hushed up. The story remained mostly a family secret until years later, when Huffman's granddaughter, Charlotte Mann, recounted what her grandmother had told her. According to Mann, her grandfather also saw strange hieroglyphic-like symbols inside of this craft, similar to those described in other UFO crash stories. No official documents confirming the crash have ever been released, but some say this is just another example of a successful government cover-up.
While Ohio's Wright-Patterson Air Force Base is not believed to be a secret crash site, many people do claim that it is a place where crashed UFOs are taken to be studied and reverse engineered. Specifically in Hangar 18, the legendary alien warehouse located on the base, where many UFO enthusiasts believe the government hides flying saucer debris, the remains of extraterrestrials, and even live aliens. Speculation of the base began after the Roswell incident in 1947, and it has continued to this day, with many people claiming that reliable sources have confirmed its existence, i.e. former military personnel. One such man was a military pilot named Oliver Henderson, who allegedly told his wife that while working for the base he was required to fly a plane filled with UFO debris and several small alien bodies from Roswell to the Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. Another former pilot, Marion Black Mac McGruger, claimed that scientists at the base conducted experiments on a live extraterrestrial being and ended up killing it. Many other experiments are said to have been carried out at the base as well, although according to the FBI, the Pentagon, and the government, it's just a regular Air Force base where everything is completely above board.
On May 21st, 1953, there were a number of reports that a UFO crashed in the desert near Kingman, Arizona, and that the military had quickly swooped in to cover it up. Arthur Stansel, a mechanical engineer working for the Air Force at the time, claimed that he was part of a team that was rushed to the crash site to investigate and recover the debris. He described seeing a small disc-shaped craft partially buried in the ground. It was made of a shiny metallic material, and there were no visible seams or rivets, which made it look like it was molded from a single piece of metal. It was unlike anything he'd ever seen, and he also claimed to have seen the body of a creature being held in a tent next to the crashed aircraft, stating he saw, quote, the dead body of a 4-foot human-like creature in a silver metallic suit. The skin on its face was dark brown. And of course, this was all covered up, with the material being loaded onto trucks and transported to an undisclosed location.
I have to say, I love a good whistleblower moment, especially when the whistleblowing is being done by military veterans in open court, and it's regarding the evidence of little green men. What a time to be alive. In July of 2023, 3 military veterans testified in a Congress hearing about UFOs and claimed that the United States government had been operating a secret UFO reverse engineering program for at least the past few decades. Claims were also made that the United States did in fact recover non-human biologics from certain alleged crash sites. Of course, the veterans were unable to go into extensive detail about the missions and operations that led to the discoveries and projects involving UFOs because they are obviously classified. But the simple act of the 3 men, Ryan Graves, Executive Director of Americans for Safe Aerospace, David Grush, retired Air Force Major, and David Fravor, retired Navy Commander, openly admitting to the existence of both UFOs, alien life forms, and secret government programs regarding the two in open court, it's pretty huge.
On November 9th of 1974 in Carbondale, Pennsylvania, 3 teenage boys reported seeing a glowing object streaking across the sky before crashing into a nearby pond. They described the object as round and emitting a strange light, which continued to glow even after it hit the water. People started showing up at the scene, gawking at this mysterious object in the pond, and as word spread, more and more people gathered, and soon local police and fire departments arrived on scene. Witnesses claimed they saw them retrieve a small metallic object, which was then covered and taken away on a truck. Official explanations later claimed that this object was just a railroad lantern that had been thrown into the pond, but some weren't so convinced, and even today people still wonder if something more mysterious had actually plummeted into the water that night.
Prior to 1967, Shag Harbor, located at the southern tip of Nova Scotia, Canada, was a pretty understated fishing village. and then a UFO came to town. On October 4th, around 11:20 p.m., residents of Shag Harbor watched as a mysterious object descended from the sky and crash landed on the water. Witnesses claimed that the craft had 3 to 4 glowing orange lights and that it was about 60 feet in length. After landing in the water, the lights began to dim until eventually all that was left was a yellowish foam, indicating that the craft had either moved too distant to be seen or that it had sunken into the icy waters of Shag Harbor. Authorities searched the area until about 3 a.m., but nothing was ever found, nor has it been to this day. Although it was confirmed that the object was not a civilian or military aircraft, all of those had been accounted for. The day after the incident, the Rescue Coordination Center filed a report with Canadian Forces headquarters claiming that something had in fact touched down in the waters of Shag Harbor and that it was of unknown origin. As I said, to this day, the object has yet to be recovered. Maybe we'll get lucky this year.
On April 18, 1962, people across multiple states witnessed something flying through the sky, which eventually crashed near the Nellis Air Force Base outside Las Vegas. The object was tracked by NORAD, which made its way across 10 US states. The object was described as a bright red or blue fireball. It was first seen on the East Coast just outside of Syracuse. Things got even stranger when the object apparently landed at one point. An Air Force spokesman said the object was on the ground for about 42 minutes and that during this time a nearby power station mysteriously lost all power. As soon as the object took off again, the power was restored. The Air Force sent out jets which pursued it across the country. Then over the Mesquite Range in Nevada, the UFO exploded in a brilliant glare that was so bright it was visible over 5 states. What makes this case so incredible is the number of witnesses. Having crossed from the East Coast to the West Coast, the UFO was seen by thousands of people. But was it just a meteor or was it something else? That whole part about it landing and then cutting off power, that's very strange. That has not been explained.
First up on our list is the Kecksburg incident that occurred in 1965 in rural Pennsylvania. On one crisp autumn day, residents witnessed a fiery object streaking across the sky before crashing into the dense woods near the town of Kecksburg. Eyewitnesses described the object as acorn-shaped and made of a strange metallic material. What's even more intriguing is how quickly authorities swooped in, cordoning off the area and removing any evidence. Despite explanations ranging from a meteor to a secret military satellite, the abrupt removal of the supposed craft and conflicting witness testimonies have only deepened this mystery. The Kecksburg incident remains a highly debated event, with many convinced that it was no ordinary piece of space debris, but rather evidence of something far more extraordinary. Heading to the American Southwest, our next point centers on an encounter in Socorro, New Mexico in 1973, a case that remains one of the most credible UFO sightings ever recorded. Local police officer Lonnie Zamora reported a close encounter with a mysterious egg-shaped craft that landed briefly near his patrol route. Zamora's account is particularly compelling because he described detailed observations of the craft's structure and behavior, noting that it emitted a powerful, almost magnetic glow and left scorch marks on the ground. His report was taken very seriously by both military investigators and UFO researchers who found that the physical evidence at the scene corroborated his story. This incident continues to be cited as one of the best documented examples of an unexplained aerial phenomenon, challenging conventional wisdom and inviting ongoing debate. In the vast expanses of Texas near Duncan, a routine drive turned into a nightmare on a warm day in 1980 for 3 individuals: Betty Cash, Vicki Landrum, and Colby Landrum. They encountered a diamond-shaped craft emitting intense heat and a strange, pulsating glow. As they approached, the object released a burst of energy that not only scorched the nearby ground, but also exposed them to what they described as high levels of radiation. The physical injuries and lingering health issues reported by the witnesses lent a terrifying credibility to the event. Despite extensive investigations, authorities have been unable to conclusively explain what occurred that day, leaving the Cash Landrum incident as one of the most unsettling and medically documented UFO encounters. Next, we travel to the skies over Alabama in 1948, where commercial pilots Wiley Childs and his co-pilot Whitted experienced an encounter that would soon spark widespread curiosity. While cruising at altitude, they observed a bright, saucer-like object following their aircraft, executing maneuvers that no conventional plane could match. The object darted away at impossible speeds, leaving behind a trail of questions rather than answers. Although the incident was initially brushed off as an optical illusion by some, the pilot's reputations and detailed accounts have ensured that this encounter remains a significant piece of aviation and UFO lore. Its early date and credible witnesses continue to invite debate about what the pilots really saw that day. Venturing into the rugged wilderness of Manitoba here in Canada, we encounter the infamous Falcon Lake incident of 1967. While exploring near Falcon Lake, Stefan Michalak came face to face with a glowing, cigar-shaped object that descended from the sky. As he drew near, the craft seemed to radiate an intense heat, and he later suffered unusual burns on his chest and hands, injuries that defied typical explanations. His physical evidence, including peculiar markings and radiation-like effects, has been thoroughly documented by local authorities and independent researchers. The Falcon Lake incident stands as one of the most chilling examples of direct human contact with an unknown aerial phenomenon, raising enduring questions about the nature of that encounter. In 1965, the quiet town of Exeter, New Hampshire found itself at the center of an extraordinary UFO event that involved a diverse group of witnesses. This included local police officers and everyday residents. According to multiple reports, a bright, disc-shaped object appeared in the sky and executed a series of maneuvers that defied conventional aeronautics. What set this case apart was the willingness of local law enforcement to document and investigate the sighting, lending an unusual degree of official credibility. Despite exhaustive searches and numerous interviews, no trace of the object was ever found, and its sudden disappearance only deepened the mystery. Our next case takes us back to the late 19th century in Aurora, Texas. According to local lore and sporadic newspaper reports from 1897, a mysterious object streaked across the sky and crashed in broad daylight. Witnesses claimed the impact left a smoking crater and remnants of an unusual metallic craft. While many dismiss this tale as folklore or a misinterpretation of natural events, its persistence in regional history makes it one of America's oldest UFO crash stories. Researchers note that the detailed accounts describing a loud explosion, strange noises, and even hints of an extraterrestrial design set the stage for later UFO narratives. Despite skepticism and a lack of physical evidence surviving to the present day, the Aurora incident remains an enduring mystery that continues to spark debate among UFO enthusiasts and historians. Heading to the Middle East, our next case unfolds in Tehran, Iran in 1976. During a tense period marked by political and military uncertainties, Iranian Air Force jets were scrambled to intercept an unidentified luminous object. Pilots reported that as they approached, their instruments malfunctioned and the craft seemed to emit a dazzling light that temporarily disrupted radar and communication systems. The incident was thoroughly documented by military personnel, and the pilots' detailed testimonies described a craft that moved with agility far beyond known aircraft capabilities. Although official explanations ranged from sensor glitches to atmospheric anomalies, many experts find these responses unsatisfactory. The Tehran UFO incident remains one of the most credible and confusing cases from the region, fueling ongoing investigations into whether advanced technology or something beyond our understanding was at work that day. Our next case takes us to the remote landscapes of Montana, where in 1967, an incident at Malmstrom Air Force Base left a lasting imprint on UFO lore. During this episode, military personnel observed unexplained lights near missile silos, and reports emerged that these mysterious phenomena coincided with temporary malfunctions of nuclear missile systems. The eerie connection between the the UFO sightings and the sensitive equipment on board the base has led many to speculate about the possibility of advanced, non-terrestrial technology interfering with human military assets. Although official statements have at times suggested sensor errors or natural phenomena, the precise timing and detailed eyewitness accounts from trained personnel make the Malmstrom incident one of the most serious and disturbing cases in UFO history. For many, the idea that such encounters could potentially impact national security only works to deepen the mystery. In 1987, the quiet surroundings of Akita Prefecture in Japan were shadowed by an encounter that left locals both terrified and intrigued. Multiple witnesses, including local police officers and residents, reported seeing a bright metallic craft that hovered silently before accelerating out of sight. The incident was particularly striking due to the detailed descriptions provided by those on the scene. Accounts noted precise, almost military-like maneuvers that defied conventional aeronautical behavior. Japanese authorities conducted investigations, yet the official records remain inconclusive, and many aspects of the event continue to puzzle experts. The Akita UFO incident not only highlights the global nature of these unexplained phenomena, but also reinforces the idea that such encounters can occur anywhere. Quiet rural regions are not immune to witnessing the extraordinary.